Morning everybody, welcome to Indycar on Wednesday. My name's Gordon Ross. Today, back in my favourite spot in Partick and broadcasting today again about two different subjects. First one is where we go from here with people power, and the second subject today is to do with Loch Lomond and its development. Let's take the first subject. So we all saw the massive result of our own efforts on Saturday with his gigantic almost 90,000 people marching through Glasgow demanding independence. Now, a lot has been made of it, and a great deal of time on social media has been given to the tiny group of what I can only describe as unionists, because they're not even really political activists. These are just people who turned up to shout abuse and wave Union Jacks. A lot of media attention has been given to them, unearned media attention. I think it's time we stopped talking about them and actually talked about us for a change. What changed on Saturday is that instead of the politicians being in control of Scotland's constitutional future, people have now taken control. We took the step on Saturday to demand what we all want, which is for Scotland to vote once more to become independent, and we need this other chance, and we need it soon. If we wait for the politicians, we will wait forever. We all know that we're going to have to wait until June to see what the SNP's stance is going to be on another independence referendum. Now, once that waiting is done, I say that is the last bit of waiting we should do, because we are always waiting for the British to do something before we can react to it. We're always on the back foot. We always have to wait for Britain to say something, to do something, or decide something before we can have a vote. And I don't know about you, but I'm totally sick of waiting for British politicians to tell us when we can start to campaign. Now, because of what happened on Saturday, that is no longer a problem. It's no longer an issue, because the people have spoken. The people have said, we are fed up. We are not going to wait any longer for the politicians to decide to start IndyRef 2. We are campaigning now. And it's time the politicians woke up and saw that the people are reacting. They're taking to the streets by the hundreds of thousands almost now. Now, there's been a lot of argument over how many people turned up. Somewhere, I think, possibly between 70 and 91,000 people, but it's anywhere in between that. But the point is, there was a great number of people who would have attended that rally who couldn't as well. So not only were there the 90-odd thousand people who showed up, but there was a good several other tens of thousands of other people who would have wanted to have been there but couldn't make it. So I think we're looking at a movement now which has certainly over 100,000 activists, and I'm not talking just about people who want independence. I'm talking about people who are prepared to go out and do things to get it. Now compare that to the 23 or so unionists who turned up to oppose us on Saturday. We've got 93,000 people wanting independence and 23 people showing up to say they don't. Now that gives you some idea of just how strong this movement now is. However, there's something that we're needing to do, and it's something which politically and legally really needs to be reasserted, and that is that now that this march has taken place, and now that the Scottish Government has seen the strength of feeling for themselves, the Scottish Government needs to put down a motion in Holyrood to reassert the sovereignty of the Scottish people. It needs to be a bill which reasserts the people's authority over the country, the people's decision about who governs them, the people's decision about who is the government of Scotland and who is the ruler of Scotland. That needs to be legally re-established publicly with a bill in Holyrood which is passed by a majority. With that, the people of Scotland do then have the mandate to carry forward the whole movement of independence by themselves. The Scottish National Party plays their part in providing the political means to achieve that. In other words, they provide the structures that we need to have the vote. That means they provide a framework, a political framework in which this can happen. Do not be put off by those who tell you that we have to wait for a Section 30 order from Westminster. We don't need to wait for permission to have an advisory referendum. The simple reason that we don't need to wait is because you may not know this, but the Brexit vote wasn't actually a referendum, and it was an advisory ballot only. It had no force in law. It was not a binding vote, but the British government has set a precedent by deciding that it should be a binding vote, that this advisory referendum on the European Union has got the force of the people behind it. It has the democratic weight to make it binding. Now, if it's good enough for Brexit, then it is good enough for Scotland leaving the UK as well. So we do not need a Section 30 order to have a perfectly legal, legitimate and fair referendum, ballot, vote, whatever you want to call it, an advisory ballot, a plebiscite, to decide ourselves how we feel about leaving the UK. So we can do that. But as I say, it's essential, I think, that we re-establish and reassert our sovereignty over both the Scottish Parliament, the British Parliament, the Queen and everybody else who might try to run Scotland. Remember that the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320 was the very first universal declaration of independence that's ever been done. It's the first UDI that was issued by anybody as far as I know. It is the bedrock, the foundation stone of the Scottish state, and it set out what Scotland was, and it set out who was in charge of Scotland, and it said right back then the people were sovereign, that they had the right to remove any rulers who they felt were not protecting the country, not looking after their interests. And that is the right that needs to be reasserted legally through a motion in the House of Parliament in Holyrood. Once that is done, then the people have got their power back. We've already taken it back physically by going on the march, and that will continue. There were going to be other bigger marches all over Scotland until we get our independence. That will continue. But the point is that we need to have that democratic mandate for ourselves. We need to have the okay of Parliament to say that we are sovereign. And I believe that that vote would be carried in an instant, no problem at all. So a referendum, call it what you will, a plebiscite, there is no impediment to it. We do not need to wait for permission from any Tories in London to have a vote of our own. We can hold a perfectly legal vote. It can be organised along traditional lines with a paper ballot, can count the ballot papers in the polling stations. We can do it any way we like, so long as it is equal and fair to all who take part. The question, I believe, should be a simple one. It should be leave the UK or remain in the UK. I think that has to be the question. It's got to be like the EU referendum. In fact, I think it should almost be a carbon copy of it, because then there is no way the English government can gainsay it, because they have legitimised their unofficial advisory referendum by acting on Brexit. They cannot then deny us the same right to act on our exit from the UK. So that is the argument. That argument holds legal force. I've taken some advice from people in the know, people who have knowledge of international law and politics, and this is what they have told me is the best way forward. After we do that and we have this vote, if it's a success and we have more than 51% in favour of leaving the UK, then we can declare the end of the Union. Now, it's not independence we're talking about here, because we were never dependent. We've never been dependent on England for anything. We've always been a nation by ourselves. We've always fed ourselves, clothed ourselves and made our own profits. We're not dependent. We are simply separating ourselves from the English state and by ending the Union, and that is what this vote is now about. So we can stop using the term independence and start using a different set of words now, and the different words are we're leaving the UK. It's either leave or remain to go down with the ship. Really, that's the only choice there is. So that's what I wanted to say to you today. We need a bill to be laid down in the Holyrood Chamber, to be passed by a majority, saying that the people of Scotland are sovereign and have the ultimate control over what the constitutional future is. That way, any vote that we have is fully empowered by Scots law, and it's underwritten by the Parliament itself and by Scots law. We have no other hoops to jump through in order to do this. Okay, let's leave the subject of leaving the UK for a moment and talk about something a little closer to home, and well, at least closer to my home anyway. And one of my show's viewers has brought to my attention something which I knew but I had forgotten about, which is that an English company, I believe they're based in Yorkshire, Flamingoland, are planning to buy Loch Lomond shores and to turn it into a theme park. Now, some of you might think, well, that's a good thing. It's going to provide employment for local people, and it will rejuvenate an area that's badly in need of it. But the problem is that Flamingoland is a large Tory donor. It is, for want of a better word, it's a pro-unionist English company that is coming to Scotland to set up a tacky theme park in the most beautiful part of our national park. Should we allow that? Or should we encourage some different type of development to take place there? Why is it that the Maid of the Loch, this beautiful paddle steamer which has been sitting at Balloch for dozens of years, cannot get the funding necessary to be fully renovated to take passengers on boat trips around the Loch? Why can that not be done, but we can sell this bit of land to an English company and turn it into a roller coaster theme park? That's the question we have to ask Scottish Enterprise. Those of you who don't know about Scottish Enterprise was an agency set up by the UK government. It's designed to attract inward investment into Scotland. Now that means it's designed to attract companies from outside Scotland to either build factories or to buy property or to invest in manufacturing or something in Scotland. Now, it's quite a laudable aim initially, was to try and attract industries to Scotland. The problem with Scottish Enterprise is that they are now trying to sell a bit of real estate. They want to unload it and make money out of selling Loch Lomond shores, which has been running at a loss for a number of years. To Flamingoland, a well-known Tory donor, which has been making donations to the Tory party, and these have been revealed in documents recently. Are we comfortable with that? We know that Jackie Baillie, the well-known Labour Party politician in Dumbartonshire, will be waving the flag for this great British success story, just as she waved the British flag for the great success story of Faz Lane. She is always happy to import some kind of British or Tory supporting industry into Scotland that cements the union together. That's the way they look at it. But are you happy about it? Would you not prefer to see a Scottish company, an indigenous company form, and take over that site and turn it into something much better, much more fitting for a national park, like a new visitor centre, like a place where the Maid of the Loch has been fully restored, and we have a ticket office, and we have a cafe, and we have visitor attractions for seeing the natural beauty of the Loch, instead of screaming roller coaster rides, ice cream and litter everywhere. What do we want to do with our national park? Do we want to turn it into Blackpool, just for the benefit of people like Jackie Baillie and the Labour Party and the Tory Party? Or do we want to see something uniquely Scottish done with it, something which is in keeping with the Loch and its surroundings? There are still going to be jobs for local people, but if you bring in a foreign company to set up in Scotland, they tend to bring their own people with them. They don't hire from the local population. If they do hire from the local population, it's usually cleaners, people to empty the bins and wash the floors. It's not the high-level jobs. So I'm just highlighting this. Those of you who live in Dumbarton will be aware of this project, or this thing looming up at the moment. And I think it's time that we got onto our MSPs and also wrote to Scottish Enterprise to say that we think Flamingoland is not an appropriate buyer for this site, and that we want to see a Scottish firm or a Scottish consortium in there doing something more in keeping with the national park, because that's what it is. It's a national park. It's a natural environment, and Flamingoland will want to turn it into a three-ring circus. You know, it will be covered in roller coasters and rides. It will be noisy. There'll be flashing lights. It's going to chase all the wildlife from one end of the loch to the other as soon as it's set up. And okay, it might make money for Flamingoland, but Who's going to benefit from the money made by Flamingoland? It will be the directors of a British company which is a Tory donor. So the only people who will benefit from Flamingoland will be Tory supporters who have invested in this English company. So it sounds like I'm being very anti-English, but I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to say to you that this is not an appropriate development for a national park. A national park is a place of natural beauty. It's a place where we're trying to preserve wildlife, and such a development as Flamingoland will scare the wildlife back into the Highlands, and the lower part of Loch Lomond will become a tacky theme park. It will become like Brighton on the Loch, and I don't want that. Anyway, I am off now. Things to think about, but remember what I said, the points this morning. We need to get a motion in the Holyrood Chamber passed, giving full sovereignty to the people, reasserting what was written into our constitution in 1320, so that is current, and that is backed by legal force and by the political establishment of Scotland as well. In that way, we will be speaking with one voice. The people will have full control. So when we march on the streets, we don't need to ask anybody's permission to do it. We are the masters of our own fate. We are the sovereign people. We're not beholden to Westminster. We're not even beholden to the SNP or even Holyrood. They serve us. And as soon as such a bill is passed, that will enshrine Scottish people's sovereignty forever. And when that is done, the legal force of that is what carries the result of the referendum to being a binding referendum, because the people have spoken, the people in Scotland are sovereign, we have the final say over what happens here. That's the end of the broadcast for today. I'll see you all later. Tune in tomorrow. Bye for now.